Hey guys, how's it going? So I hope you're having a good day today, and I hope all is going well with you. So today we're going to do a radio story, and for this radio story we've got a real interesting one here. This took place in the early 1980s, and we have drama, infighting, I would say disorganization, and just plain weirdness, to be honest with you. Now, I've got some notes right here I'm going to glance off of now and then because this would be just way too much to remember, because this story is a bit complex. And I've heard this story before, but I didn't know everything about it. But I happened to stumble upon something online, reading an old article and reading some stuff on Facebook, which I don't go on Facebook too often, but I just happened to go on there, and I was reading this story and I thought, man, this would be just too good not to tell. So for today's story, we're going to talk about 107.7 WUWU, Withersfield, East Aurora, New York, which is part of the Buffalo, New York radio market. 107.7 has always had a bit of a spotty signal in the Buffalo, New York area, and they've had a slew of formats over the years. They've been Christian programming, they've been country, they've been easy listening, they've been smooth jazz. They've just been a plethora of things. But today we're going to focus on the format that they had from 1982 to 1986, and it was a chaotic four years for the 107.7 signal. So we'll start from the very beginning. 107.7 launched in the early 1960s. It joined a string of other radio stations that called themselves the Rural Radio Network. And they broadcasted like farm news, country music, stuff like that. It lasted a few years, and then Pat Robertson bought the station. Yes, the same Pat Robertson from the Christian Broadcasting Network and the 700 Club. Well, Robertson, or should say CBN, but Robertson owned the station from the late 60s until about 1981. Robertson decided to get out of the radio business, and he sold the radio stations that he had around the United States. Now, by this time, the call letters were WBIV. So, Robertson sold the station for $350,000, which would be over $1 million in today's money, to a group of people. It was like a coalition of different people that got together and decided to buy a radio station. So, the main person behind this was a guy by the name of Dr. Ron Chamil. I believe I'm saying his name correctly. Dr. Chamil was a dentist from the Buffalo area, I believe. I know he was a dentist. And another person that came on board was a young guy who was about 30 at the time, by the name of Bob Allen. Who had worked at a few different stations around the Buffalo radio market and around Western New York, who incidentally was fired from most of them. Allen's aunt and uncle also came on board, and there were a couple of other people that came on board, I believe. Well, when they took ownership of the station, the format was changed to progressive rock, and they changed the call letters to WUWU. Now, I'm not sure what the origin of those call letters are or why those call letters were chosen, but nevertheless, it was WUWU. And they took a progressive rock format, which was unusual because the progressive rock format really wasn't a thing anymore by that time. A lot of stations around the country that had progressive rock formats had evolved into album-oriented rock, meaning tighter playlists, playing just like one song instead of playing whole album sides, scaling down more obscure artists, stuff like that. Well, WUWU kind of took a different direction. They played a lot of 70s rock that was popular, but they kind of mixed it with new wave music and some pop music that was popular at the time. So you might hear something like Led Zeppelin's Black Dog, Billy Joel Pressure, Please Spirits in the Material World, The Cars Shake It Up, stuff like that. Well, at first, things seemed to be going okay. WUWU started building a small but loyal audience. And like I said, the signal was spotty in parts of the market. So it's said that some people would put tinfoil on the antenna of their radio to get WUWU in. Or if you were or also like if you had a stereo on your stereo receiver, you might flip the switch to mono so you could hear the station a little bit better. But WUWU, as said, was starting to get an audience, but the station really wasn't making a lot of money, and they may have even been in the red. Well, it didn't take long for there to be some friction between the various owners, mainly from Dr. Chamil and Bob Allen. It said Bob Allen was kind of a very ambitious guy. He was young, he was ambitious, he had a bit of an ego on him, and in his mind, you know, he really truly believed that he knew best and that, you know, he knew more than that a lot of people did, and maybe was just a little too ambitious for his own good, as some people have said. Well, what started to happen was Alan started adding some more harder rock to the playlist, and even some metal. And the other people who had a stake in the station were not liking this. Now, the doctor, he owned most of the station. He had 60% stake in the station. So he had the majority of the power. So he pretty much had veto power of what was going to happen and what wasn't going to happen. And at the time, the station kind of developed some edgy liners, like some bold station liners and some local commercials. Like one liner went, and I'll put a couple of links in the description, by the way. It went, WUWU, Withersfield, East Aurora, like that. And there was another funny commercial for this record store. It was like, a record store where you could buy new records, or you could take record albums or tapes that you weren't listening to anymore and trade them in for new stuff or new used stuff. Like they had this one where this guy, I don't know if it was Alan or if it was somebody else, who was doing this monster voice, like, come on down or else, or something like that. It almost sounded like a cheesy monster voice, like from a B movie, mixed with like the evil gremlin or something like that. It was pretty funny. But nevertheless, there was definite friction going on. And it got to the point where Dr. Chamil wanted Alan out of there, because at this point the station was losing money. And I believe the doctor was actually trying to sell the station at this point, because at this point the station was losing money. And I'm kind of going off my notes a little bit here. I believe it said that the doctor rented an armed guard to keep Alan out of the station, so to speak. I cannot verify if that's true or not, but that's what I've heard. Then something very weird happened. Alan, who I believe had just been fired from the station, or was about to be fired, took over the broadcast of the station. He hijacked the signal for a number of hours and was playing heavy metal in protest. And there was another incident. I believe it happened again sometime later. I believe Mr. Allen was fired by this point, and I believe he had taken a radio station van down to where WUWU's transmitter was, and again had hijacked the station, and I believe aired his grievances on the air. And he was arrested by the police. And somebody who worked over at a competitor over at 97 Rock had commented that he had heard the broadcast. And the second time it happened, where Alan broke into the station, they're like, oh no, here we go again. Well, anyway, there was a big falling out. And sometime soon after that, the station, the doctor decided to take the station, as well as other people, as well as the other co-owners, decided to take the station in a new direction. They flipped the format to kind of a new age smooth jazz format, kind of before smooth jazz was really a thing, but they had flipped it to a format that played contemporary jazz and new age music, and they were calling themselves 1077 WUWU, the sound of the future. And maybe some of you from Buffalo can verify this for me, but I read a story where they had billboards around town that had cows on them, and it said WUWU, the sound of the future. Well, by this point, I believe everybody involved with WUWU was kind of sick of all the drama, and I think the whole experience just wore everybody down from what it sounds like. So the end of WUWU came in about mid-1986, where the station was sold to a new owner, and WUWU's format was changed to classic rock under the new call letters WBYR, the Bear. So that marked the end of WUWU. Certainly an interesting sounding station, and certainly interesting from the air checks that I've heard of this station. But talk about a match made in hell. And you kind of almost wonder, like, should this be a cautionary tale of what not to do in radio or what not to do in any other business venture? And that is, think very closely before you join in like a joint business or something like that. Like, say you have a group of people that are going to get together to buy a car dealership, or together to start a restaurant or something like that. Just be aware of, if you have too many cooks in the kitchen, you're going to get friction, you're going to get disagreement, you're going to get egos, and you're going to get clashes of personality and stuff like that. So I think this is a cautionary tale of, be careful who you go into business with, and if you're really serious about going into business, the less people, honestly, the better. But very, very funny story, very dramatic story. I know it wasn't funny for the people involved, but definitely from the sidelines, it's definitely a funny story, and definitely one of those stories that just kept radio interesting, for sure. So I thought I would share this with you guys. Now, so I got a question for you guys. Are any of you from the Buffalo area? Do any of you remember this? Or did any of you know anybody connected to this or anything? I would really like to know, because this is one of the crazier stories that I've honestly heard. Well, guys, that's going to do it for me. I want to thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And as always, guys, have a great rest of your day.